Welcome to the Binary Agora. I'm your host, Alba Rivera Martinez, and in this episode, we will be engaging with a hot topic in the channel, which is that of AI overviews, which we have already reviewed in previous episodes, for instance, with Gozia Kozak on the impact of some of Google's policies on news publishers, and we have also reviewed that particular topic with Todd Davis with reference to AI overviews and how, from competition law, we can address the competitive problems posed by its introduction. And to do that, I have with me today Tim Cowen. He's the chair in the antitrust practice at Pricekill & Co. LLP and also co-founder of the Movement for an Open Web. He's a specialist in competition law and public policy for the information, communication, and technology sector. So welcome to the Agora, Tim.
Thank you very much.
To get straight into it, and since you're here, Tim, I wanted to ask you to acquaint us with the complaint that you have just filed on behalf of MOW, the Independent Publishers Alliance, and Foxglove Legal before the European Commission, the UK CMA, and the Italian Competition Authority on AI overview. So first of all, I wanted to ask you, what does the complaint consist of, and what do you seek to achieve through it?
Okay, well, I think one of the things I should pick up on is that we've just filed. Actually, this problem has existed now for about 3 or 4 years. So if we go back to when it started, Google introduced a product called Bard. Bard was its name for its AI large language model. Just to familiarize your members, readers, viewers with the background, what initially happened in France was that the French Competition Authority was asked by the website owners, publishers, to intervene because they saw Google taking their content without permission or payment and then repositioning it at the top of its search engine results page in a way that then excluded their content from being seen by users. The Competition Authority helped them out. There was a very short period of time in which it intervened. It fined Google 500 million euros, and then Google provided certain undertakings, which it didn't fulfill. The authority then fined it another 250 million euros. And we have a position in France where the payment for content, I don't think, is being made because Google takes without permission or payment, but at least the AI overviews have not been rolled out in France. So that, if you like, is the baseline. Why were they not rolled out? Well, if you look at the European Commission's 2017 decision, what the Commission identified there was that Google was promoting its own shopping products over those of rivals. So discrimination was identified as an abuse of dominance. That's been reinforced by the European Court of Justice's decision in the Juice Pass Italian Autostrada case. So if you look at the obligation on a dominant provider of something like a search engine or a product like a app store, where the content that's being supplied is supplied by others, the obligation is not to discriminate among the products that are then displayed by the platform. Now, quite clearly, when Google is producing from content that is taken by others its own AI overview and displaying that at the top of the page, that's blatantly discriminatory. It's also bundling, because if you look by comparison with what is provided by a business like Perplexity or OpenAI, you go and get the AI product, you use it. That's a separate product. It's not bundled in with the world's biggest search results page as a way of forcing consumers to read it rather than read the underlying links. So you can see there's a combination problem there. That combination problem really starts with the interface with the website owners. So website owners are faced with an impossible choice, really. They are faced with Google's search bot, which accesses their website, and Google is saying, we will not allow you to be seen only in search results pages. You have to provide your content so that we can use it. And they're coercing the use of that content for their own AI using their monopoly search engine. You can see that very clearly. Google changed its terms and conditions. So if I go back to about mid-2023, it changed its terms and conditions. The pre-existing situation had applied for maybe 20 years, which was a basic deal that The website owner makes its content available. The search engine then crawls the content, puts it in an index, ranks it by relation to relevance to query. Search query is then put into the search engine, and the most relevant results appear at the top of the page so that the users can then click on those websites. Those websites then make money by displaying advertising that is relevant to the user. So the user gets a relevant result. They get free at point of consumption, and they get to see adverts that relate to those interests. That's how the system has worked for the last 20 years. Google changed that about 3 years ago and imposed in its terms and conditions a little and AI, so that there was no choice available to any publishers about what they're doing, what they're sharing. They're simply being forced to share if they want to be seen. And for a digital marketplace, which is now absolutely enormous, it's the way in which most businesses provide their products to the world, not being seen in Google, which is a 90+% of the world's search market, is really a non-choice. It's like being, you can consign yourself to oblivion if you want, but that's not really much of a choice. So that's the position that existed. We work with publishers all the time. The movement for an open web is a combination of businesses that are technologists, they're technology supply chain people, they're publishers, they're part of the ad tech world, and the publishers as well. And we work with a large number of small publishers, as well as a few big ones, to identify problems. What was happening during 2022-23 was the increasing rollout. Maybe that's a bit too early on, really 2024 that we started monitoring. So we monitored for a year the promotion of Google's AI overviews in relation to certain search terms. They broadly fall into 3 categories, and there's probably a reason for that I can come back to. But the first category was celebrity news, the next one is sports news, and the next one is general news. So these are all news websites. They will follow various different things in different ways. There's hundreds of them. They do things that relate to particular interests. There's niche interests in different types of sport, as you can imagine, or different types of things that some people think of as celebrity. It's not all Hollywood Reporter. Those things depend on the end consumer and what their interests are. And we monitored 3,500 search terms for about a year and identified that they were increasingly suppressed in favor of Google's own AI overview. That's the core evidence which shows effect on the market, effect on competition. It's also helpful in showing causation because it shows search term suppression to websites. So you can look at this on a before and after basis and say, well, before this came along, you would have been 30% or more higher. Since we did that analysis, the markets got worse. And from the point of view of the publisher, there are fewer and fewer searches for which there is essentially free distribution of the products in search in the search engine for the benefit of advertising. What we've also found is that Google is promoting its own YouTube answers into increasing numbers of responses. Why would they do that? Well, they get more money from YouTube advertising than they get from. They potentially could be losing some money from display advertising to relevant websites, but they make more from the YouTube ads than they would lose. So this is a profit maximizing strategy for Google. Sorry, that was just the background. We put the case in last year to the CMA, to the European Commission, and to the Italian authority, and we also provided a copy of it to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice has been looking at this issue in the context of the Google search case, the Judge Mehta decision. And part of their remedy trial looked in great detail at AI and whether AI was going to develop as a new product alongside search. So there's quite a lot of economic expert and technical expert evidence that was revealed in the case in 2025, which we built on. We were involved in that case, and so we were looking at what that was revealing. One of the things it actually revealed, which Judge Mehta talks about in his decision, is the problem of an LLM being largely out of date. So when it comes to celebrity news, sports news, and general news, your fundamental problem with a large language model is it's all last year's stuff. So he uses in his decision a reference to Taylor Swift's marital status, which allegedly changes quite a bit from time to time. And the need to keep up then becomes a problem for a search engine for which fast search is then needed. So you need to swiftly update the search results with content from others. And obviously, what appears to have happened is that from the evidence we've seen, obtaining information from websites that specialize in celebrity sports and news has become a priority. And that's clearly, been reflected in the numbers. So we put the complaint in to the CMA, European Commission, and Italian authority during May, June 2025. We then met with the authority. We've talked to the various different people. The European Commission formally announced its inquiry in December 2025. The CMA has included the issue within its DMCCA inquiry into Google search, and we're awaiting the outcome of what the CMA is going to do, which is effectively current at the moment, because they are proposing to accept voluntary, non-binding commitments from Google in relation to this. Remind me of your question, but I think you were asking a question about what's Google's response to this. Can you remind me?
Google argues against all of this framework that actually AI overviews drives engagement and that publishers benefit from appearing in AI overviews. So I wondered, how do you respond to that framing, and how does that, I would say, reconcile with the hard facts that you have analyzed via the empirical evidence?
It's difficult to emphasize strongly enough how those sort of statements are simply irreconcilable with the facts. We have, for example, recently seen Bauer Media closing. Bauer Media being a major publishing group, which is largely based in Germany, but also runs magazines and outlets and media in the UK. In the last couple of weeks has announced the closure of Heat and Grazia magazine, which are celebrity news magazines. Specifically in the announcement, they refer to the fact that the AI overview is the reason why they're closing the business. I deal with news and these publishers pretty much on a daily basis. The volume of traffic loss is simply massively reduced.
Yes, I have actually here some of the figures. The study that you also shared with me on conducted by Authoritas documents that there's a minimum traffic loss around 5.8% on desktop, 4.6% on mobile across all keyword categories, but notes that this could peak close to 79% for specific high-value queries when zero-click behavior is factored in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at the fact that 80% of all search terms are non-commercial, so you're looking for your government website, or you're looking for, filling out a form for your tax thing or whatever that might be, if you included all those in the numbers, well, it's going to make the marginal difference very small, but the marginal difference is very big if you're a celebrity news website. We know from the Daily Mail, for example, which covers all of these things, that they've had a 70% decline in reduction of traffic from general search. That doesn't mean that they've lost a huge amount in terms of revenue, because if they also have their own apps and their own subscription and all the rest of it, then you may be able to withstand the problem if you're a big player with a big brand and an established presence and subscription, etc. But that makes it very, very difficult for the smaller players, who will have a bigger exposure to being more relevant and being found in search. So this is a massive impact on the process of competition, the process of entry, the process of innovation, and also the fulfillment of rather more niche and narrower interests across a broader range of people. I think we're seeing a very considerable impact there. There's also research independently done by Pew Research and Enders Analysis, and there's more and more material coming out of the US from places like MIT, which is showing the increasing prevalence of AI overviews in response to many different types of search. Google announced 2 days ago that it's got a new presentation, that it's going to produce more and more AI overviews. I think the argument that this is increasing dwell time and time for publishers is not true when you look at the time that's spent on the individual publisher's website. I think it might be true if you look at the amount of time spent on Google, because what we're seeing is what's known. SparkToro has talked about this for a long time, which is the emergence of a zero-click world. What that means is that you spend time on the inside the Google App Store, walled garden, Google ecosystem, search results pages or whatever. So you spend your time there, you spend your time looking on that. You then are exposed to Google ads. So Google is increasing the amount of time that's being spent, but that's because it's taking time from individual websites. So if you look at it from Google's point of view, it's great, because Google is getting more and more time spent on the Google platform, but it's at the expense of the reduction of time spent on individual websites. Now, you do get into a statistical series of questions because there's a very large amount of traffic across the world, which is bounce traffic, bot traffic, where there's a very small amount of time spent on individual websites. So what you're looking at, what we really, I think everybody really cares about in advertising is people looking at websites. So you've got to strip out all of the noise that you get from high volumes of bot traffic and the bounce rate and things like that. I don't see any credence in the argument that this is increasing, time on websites. That really isn't supported by the facts. And what you're also seeing is increasing vociferance by the independent publishers. So we work with the Independent Publishers Alliance. There's also Impress. There's also the Association of Online Publishers. There's also the European Publishers Council, the News and Media Association of the US. You're talking about 5,000 publishers that disagree with one Google and its view of the facts.
I guess that gives us a good account of facts and what is happening out there. And as I said earlier, and you also outlined, you refer this complaint to the DOJ, the Commission, the CMA, the Italian Competition Authority. So since AI Overviews has rolled out at a global scale, I was wondering, why did you choose these authorities, and how do you think that we can avoid fragmenting this global digital space further by seeking redress from different types of competition authorities that will surely apply, I would say, different legal standards to meet anti-competitive conduct?
The Department of Justice has already been looking at this for some time. They did try and bring a case which involved more of a vertical element and discrimination within search pages, but that was ruled out of scope by Judge Mehta early on in the investigation in the Google search case in the US. They were intensely looking at how this would operate in relation to a remedy. This continues to be an issue in front of the monitoring trustee in the US search case and the implementation of remedies. So it's not gone away, it's current in the US. What you also have in Europe is the same team that's dealing with this, which is people who've been around almost as long as I have, like Bryce Alibert, helped formulate the original cases against Google for search, which originally went to the Commission in about 2010 on behalf of people like StreetMap and Foundum and FotMaps. There's a wide range of publishers that were affected by Google's universal search algorithm in 2000, which was introduced in 2008 from then onwards. So we've had these problems for many years. The team that dealt with that investigation focused on Google search shopping and left the maps piece to be litigated and the impact on news to be allegedly solved by the European Copyright Directive, which it didn't solve. So we've had the shopping issue, which is discrimination in search results, about 10 years ago. You've got a group of people in the European Commission very familiar with this as a set of problems, and those are the people now picking it up under 102. The problem with the search and shopping case was also designed to be solved by the DMA. And one of the things facing the Commission back in 2018 was that there was a decision. Google immediately appealed it to the General Court and subsequently the European Court of Justice. That took 7 years. What do you do in the interim is then a problem for the authority that sees an abuse. And it could have argued with Google about its non-compliance with the 2017 decision, which would have led to another 7 years of appeals or more. But instead, the DMA got passed, which includes specific provisions designed. One of the criticisms that can be leveled at the DMA is it's dealing with history. It's dealing with all of the abuses that had existed before the DMA came into force. If you look at Articles 5 and 6, it deals with this. And it was designed to deal with this under the DMA because there was a lack of enforcement process, right? So part of our complaint to the European Commission is, yes, this is an abuse under 102. We've got an established monopolist that's abusing its position, but also it can be looked at under the Digital Markets Act. Pick your poison was the basis on which we put the complaint in. We said you can decide how to look at this. We also put into the complaint the fact that at the same time that we were observing suppression through AI overviews, Google was also increasing its algorithmic suppression of sites that were using multiple affiliate links. So if you think about how a website is structured, it's like any website that seeks to sell something to you or offer you a discount, you have to link out to someone else. If you're going to compare and contrast prices, as was happening in shopping, you would have multiple suppliers linking to you. So if you've got 15 different suppliers of different types of training shoes or running shoes or walking boots, or whatever it might be, if you're going to be a site that shows comparison prices for different types of shoe, then you're going to link out to the different suppliers. That's going to give you lots of affiliate links. Google says that's spam, that is. So we're going to strike it out of our search results. We don't want anybody having competitive online marketplaces. I'm rather suspicious that the rationale for that is that Google likes being the vehicle for the sale of products online, and that it doesn't want third parties to come in that are going to provide consumers with cheaper prices for a range of products. Also, of course, if you've got cheaper prices, there's less money to go into advertising. So as a Google advertising system, what it appears to be doing is eliminating competitors in the advertising market that are going to reduce the value of its ads. So you can see it's economic.
This is the site reputation abuse policy applied by Google that now the DMA has.
People keep saying to me, "Oh, this is the site reputation abuse."
No, it's the name.
It's not. It's not. It's just
Okay.
no. This is just discriminatory abuse, right?
Okay.
It's very dangerous to dress up. I think it's very dangerous to dress up what is blatant, basic discrimination in any other clothes or language. So Google came up with the idea some years ago that if you say, this is self-preference, that in some way makes it acceptable. So that what you're doing is you're accusing me of self-preference. And what I do is sell my own products. Of course, I'm preferring my own products. It's quite a neat trick if you can get away with it, right? Site reputation abuse policy. There's no abuse of a site reputation. It's absolute nonsense on stilts. What they're doing is discriminating against other people and then trying to create a new form of language to distinguish what they're doing and say, oh, it's not that at all. But I'm refusing completely to go down the road of accepting Google language.
But the European Commission is engaging with that language because it has already triggered a non-compliance proceeding on the basis of the application of this policy, and it has to give it some name. So it decided to accept, I would say, Google's terminology.
I think that's a tragic mistake.
Okay.
Don't you? I mean, I think it's a tragic mistake that if the defendant says, you're accusing me of innocence, why don't we call it the innocence case? I mean, it's tragic, really, to accept that. And I know the officials, and I'd love to have this debate with them. And why don't they call it the abuse of dominance case Mark II? Give it a number. Why don't we call it Google does it again, right? Because that would be arguably prejudicial. If it's prejudicial one way, it's also prejudicial another, and either way, they shouldn't be using that sort of language.
Going back to specifics and to substance, you talked about remedies, and this is my last question. And we have discussed for a bit here in the channel, how would we go back to the competitive scenario? So there have been like loads of discussions on this. So whether content and remuneration for publishers is the best alternative, opt-out or opt-in mechanisms for AI overviews, more transparency around data, or are we thinking about something more structural to happen in the market?
Here, I think we've got what's called the juggernaut problem, right? Everybody's used to Google making 100 and 200 changes a year, and you can't change that because you've just got to live with it. I mean, a lot of people now have grown up with it. Well, I didn't, and I don't really see the particular problem with it. I think if you think critically about the issue, what we can do is to come up with a world that we'd like to live in. Right? What world would we like to live in? Well, I would put forward, and the reason I gave you the explanation at the beginning about France, and I think this is a wider geopolitical question now as well. So I think France is a really good example of this. What you've got in France is you've got independent publishers that can be found in search results. So we're not turning a clock back. We've stopped the clock. We've stopped the machine or the juggernaut from obliterating independent publishers in France. Well done, France. Why can't everybody be like France? So what we're expecting to take place in France is large numbers of small publishers will be able to see and they'll be able to provide their stuff in the light of day. That's quite a nice idea that you can actually support growth and jobs through large numbers of small businesses that are doing things that people like and want and fulfill their needs. That's quite a nice idea. So what we're seeing is actually the prevention of harm rather than simply, being rolled over by the juggernaut. And I think that should really be the standard against which all competition in digital markets are measured, because what we've established, and is the basis for the DMA, but we've known this for over 100 years. Some markets tend to monopoly if they're left alone. I was general counsel at BT for many years, and if you look at telecoms markets, we promoted the idea that they could be opened up to competition, provided that there was a regulatory intervention designed to secure competition, diversity, and innovation, because otherwise it would have become a monopoly. That's the telecommunications regulatory regime, and that's how it exists. Why is that? Well, because there's a high fixed cost, low variable cost, high network externality to all communications platforms. That is not simply true of telecoms. It's true of all the things that are built on top of them, because they effectively use those same economies of scale, scope, and externalities. You have an inevitability. If you don't intervene, you will have an inevitable outcome, which is monopolization. That's why the DMA exists. That's why what you should do is to prevent harm at the beginning of every investigation. Provided you've got a threshold that harm is taking place, then interim measures are vital. They should be the default setting to prevent the world from being smashed by the juggernaut, because otherwise you will eliminate the capacity that existed in the market, and you cannot turn the clock back once that's happened, because people have gone out of business, they've gone off and done other things. You've lost the capacity in the marketplace, which I think is increasingly happening. I mean, we're seeing in the UK, these are the government figures, there's growth in digital jobs for the 15 years up to the last 3. So we had good jobs in lots of different things people were doing, and that's collapsed. The last time I looked at the numbers, we'd lost 150,000 jobs since 2025. And this is not the replacement of things that people were doing with more efficient outcomes. This is the suppression of things that people were doing, which are actually helpful to consumers, which were supporting consumer needs, which were delivering against niche requirements that have been suppressed in favor of some sort of AI sloppy gobbledygook. So it's not a great outcome for the consumer. It's a great outcome if you want to have more people looking at YouTube videos, which isn't really a great thing for the economy. So the impact on the individual consumer based on CMA figures is something in the region of £1,500 per household in the UK, and that's on an annualized basis. So you're looking at a lot of money, and at a time of a cost of living crisis, I think that should be a priority for intervention from the authorities. And that comes from the fact that if you're buying things online, the 3 biggest things that you buy online these days are houses, cars, and insurance. But you also buy your shopping products. You buy and are advertised different types of soap powder or washing machine. There are a million different things, but they're all bought online. And those things aren't sold to you for a price. They're sold to you on the basis of an advert, and the advert's price has gone up. So the people like Unilever or, the big advertisers are paying more for their advertising. And that's then added into the cost of the products that you're buying, which is having an effect on inflation, which we have seen gone up in the last 5 years quite considerably. And I would suggest that that is partly down to at least partly, certainly it's down to other factors as well, but it's partly down to the increasing costs that are imposed on product sales, online product sales, and through these platforms. So I think it's a very, very high priority, and it should be dealt with as a matter of such by all the authorities.
With that, we don't have any time for more. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining us here
Pleasure.
in the Agora. And we expect to also hear more from this complaint and also your intervention within these cases in the future.
Okay, thank you very much.